But barring the rapture, let's try to project, kind of like Clarence Larkin said, as much as we can, the next 10 years out, potentially. And I know people don't like to think about 10 years, but just we're thinking theoretically here, okay? But what's next on the agenda? Many people will talk about, of course, Israel. They got the Hamas issue, Palestinian issue, but there's some that will they'll maybe say the next thing on the agenda is maybe Psalm 83 war, or we know Ezekiel 38's hanging out there. So how does that? And I'm not asking for any commitment necessarily on any of it, but do you anticipate? So I think everybody agrees on Ezekiel 38. Not everybody agrees on Psalm 83, but with all those as a backdrop, maybe what would you anticipate over the next few years as it relates to building up towards Ezekiel 38, which we know is a true, obviously, hasn't happened yet.
Well, we know that Iran is going to continue to be a thorn in Israel's side because they're mentioned in Ezekiel 38. So we know that they're not going to go away. Now their power could wane and then come back. And so we know they're going to be a major obstacle to Israel. We know that they are. We know that Russia, Ezekiel 38 is going to continue to be an aggressive power, kind of what they're demonstrating now. Turkey's mentioned in Ezekiel 38. You've got Erdogan there, who's,
not a friend.
despises Israel.
Right.
So we know a lot of these nations are, again, there can be twists and turns, as I said, ups and downs, but those nations are going to continue there. But Israel is going to continue to try as much as they can. And I think the United States is going to try to help them again forge this peace that's needed over there, some kind of a broader type of a peace agreement. Now, I don't know if I'm in the majority or in the minority about the Psalm 83 war. I'm not convinced that there's a separate Psalm 83 war. Because that's a psalm by Asaph. It's a psalm that just mentions a lot of kind of the inveterate enemies around Israel, that they're going to be destroyed. But there's nothing in Psalm 83 about timing. In Ezekiel 38, it tells us Israel's going to be regathered. They're going to be at rest and living securely. It's going to be in the latter days. There's a lot of chronological indicators there in Ezekiel 38. Now, still not everyone agrees on the timing,
sure.
but there's some parameters you have there. Psalm 83 gives no statement at all about when it's going to happen. Now, if you take all those nations there and look at them being destroyed, you'd have to say, well, that's never happened. But to me, I just see that more as a psalm that Asaph wrote to David early in his reign, telling David and encouraging him, these people that are, you're just your constant enemies, God's going to deal with them someday. He's going to destroy these nations. So I don't think it's going to be all at one time that it will happen, but these nations are going to be destroyed. And so I think, to me, even if someone believes in a Psalm 83 war, being dogmatic about when it is in relation to other events, you just can't be, because there's nothing there that chronologically tells it's when it's going to happen. It's just all speculation. Whereas Ezekiel 38, there's some markers there that it can only fit in a few basic time periods. So, but to me, Psalm 2 is a psalm that tells, all the nations, he's going to come and dash the nations like a potter's vessel. He's going to, say, he's going to say to him, the kingdom's yours. These nations are yours.
Your inheritance, yeah.
And so we don't look for a Psalm 2 war. I mean, I guess you'd be Armageddon, maybe it would be at the end, but it's kind of just God giving his people encouragement. These nations are going to be destroyed. I'm going to come back. I'm going to rule. And so I don't see a Psalm 83 war. A lot of people see that's the inner ring of nations. And then, and then Ezekiel 38, it's the outer ring. But Ezekiel 38 could include the inner nations as well, because after he mentions that there's 10 proper names there, at the end in chapter 38, verse 6 of Ezekiel, he says, and many peoples with you.
Yeah.
So it could include the nearer nations as well. But, I've kind of got a little deal here. I'll just kind of mention this quickly, if you don't mind, just what I see for Israel's future. I got 7 words that start with T.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it, yes.
And so, the first thing that we know about, I think, from the Bible, I call the treaty. There's going to be a treaty at some point. Daniel 9:27, Israel's going to get peace for 3.5 years. Then there's going to be a temple. There's got to be a rebuilt temple, because in the middle of the 7 years, Antichrist stops them from offering sacrifices, according to Daniel 9:27, which, if you're going to stop it, means it had to have started. Then there's going to be the trap. I call it the trap. Ezekiel 38:39, this invasion. Then there's going to the traitor. The Antichrist is going to double cross Israel and begin to persecute them. Then you have tribulation, their time of trouble, the time of Jacob's trouble. Then you're going to have a turning. The Jews are going to turn to the Messiah en masse at his return. You're going to look upon him whom they pierced, and mourn for him like one mourns for an only son. And then you're going to have a triumph, in the millennial kingdom. So that's kind of my 7 words, the kind of simple words that all start with T, to kind of give the sketch of
You're a preacher.
where I think things are headed. But so I think the first one there, and now the temple could be rebuilt before the rapture. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. But that's going to play large and loom large in all of this, because there has to be a temple there at least sometime before the middle of the tribulation for there to be sacrifices started for them to be stopped. And that's going to be part of, I think, this treaty as well. And again, we got the Ezekiel 38 nations that are out there today that really are all, somewhat loosely, kind of a loose coalition kind of joined together. So those are the things I kind of look at in the near future. But Israel right now, I mean, just to put it in kind of common terms, is on a roll.
Yeah,
they are. I mean, the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis aren't really doing much right now either. Iran has been basically, all their proxies have kind of been neutralized. The kind of the ace in the hole that Iran has is nuclear weapons. Yep. That's why they're hanging on that. And somewhere they've got this 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that you can take to 90. Yep. Now, I would assume, I bet Israel knows where it is. Yep. We may even know. America may know.
Well, Iran said the other day that it's buried under that, and they're trying to get access to it. But again, whether they're telling the truth or not, who knows?
But it's somewhere over there where they could probably try to get it. And so, that's something that may have to be taken care of in the future as well. Because kind of, again, that's their one thing with Iran that they can kind of lean on. Hey, we've got this. We get a nuclear weapon, then kind of all bets are off. But those are a few of the things I think. I think we're going to continue to see Israel prosper. I think we're going to continue to see peace expand there in that part of the world. Again, if Saudi Arabia were to come in, I mean, that's the deal of the century. Yeah, really getting Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel, and then that begins the setup and this preparation for this Daniel 9:27 covenant that the Antichrist will come. We'll talk about that in a moment, and make with Israel. That's the beginning then of the tribulation. The rapture doesn't start the 7-year tribulation. It starts with this treaty. So the rapture could happen, a month before, a year before. I don't think the rapture will be many years before the beginning of the tribulation, because part of the purpose of the rapture is to deliver us from the coming wrath. Right. Yeah. Well, if the wrath's too far away, we don't need to be delivered from it. So it's got to be, somewhat on the horizon. But the rapture will take place. That peace then will be brought to bear, and that will set everything. Then that will start the end time clock. Really, with Israel again, of that 7 year, that final 7 years, that 70th week of Daniel.
That brings up some other thoughts. So that as you mentioned, Ezekiel 38, there's a variety of perspectives on timing of it, and but do you think, if I understand you correctly, is your thinking that the Ezekiel 38 war happens inside the tribulation period?
That's where I place it. Mm-hmm. Yes, you've got several things to look at there. Again, Israel's regathered now. Almost half the Jews live in Israel. It says they have to be at rest and living securely. It says that twice there. Mm-hmm. And again, it says it's in the latter years, the last days. And I think it's the latter years of the last days for Israel. It's not the last days of the church age. Right. Because now we're dealing with Israel. So that's why I wouldn't put it before the rapture. Oh, okay. Because it says it's in the latter years or the last days, and I take that to be the last days for Israel. Mm-hmm. The last days of the church age, I think, will end with the rapture. So I put it after the rapture takes place. Now, some place it, many do, between the rapture and the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. Because in chapter 39, you have them burning the weapons for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And that gives you the tribulation to do that. If you place the invasion like I do, somewhere in that first 3.5 year period, you have them burning those weapons on into the beginning of the millennium.